I'm recording my homily for the second Sunday of Lent, which is already over a week ago. So I got the flu really bad, starting about a week ago. In fact, I had to have a priest come in and fill in for me this last weekend, the third Sunday of Lent. So I didn't actually prepare a homily for this Sunday. But maybe in a day or two, something will come to me. I'll have a chance to reflect on the readings a little bit. Either that or we'll just have to wait until next week. But this is the first time in almost 2 years, well, I can't say almost 2 years, maybe over a year and a half now that I've been doing these online, that I've actually missed a Sunday. This is the first time I missed a Sunday. So anyways, maybe I just have to accept it. All right, just surrender it over. So this is going back for the readings, which was the first reading on the second Sunday of Lent was about Abraham. You remember the story of Abraham and Isaac? A really disturbing story. If you take it at its face value, Abraham, who's the dad of Isaac, is being asked by God to slay him, to sacrifice him. If somebody was an atheist, all they would have to do is point to that story and say, why would I ever want to believe in the Bible? I mean, look at what God asked Abraham to do. But God is not a God of the surface. He goes deeper. He's always going deeper. God had no intention of having Abraham slay his son Isaac. But it was a test. It was an incredible test. That's the first reading. Okay, this is the Gospel's the transfiguration of Jesus on the mountain with Peter, James, and John, as well as Elijah and Moses. All right, so that's where I'm going with this weekend. And I'm not remembering everything I put in my homily, but oh well. At the time, if you remember about a week ago, we had snow on the ground, and so I talked a little bit about that. And I said, the rain and the snow are very different. Rain is harsh. When you're driving in rain, when you're driving your car and it's raining, it's loud, isn't it? It's hitting the windshield, your windshield wipers are going, but it's just loud. If you're listening to the music, you have to turn the music up. If you're talking, you have to talk louder. But at the same time, here in the Seattle area, we get so much rain that we're used to driving in it. And so the driver is often is paying more attention, but everybody else in the car, they're just asleep, they're not really paying attention. And so the rain is it's loud, it's kind of obnoxious. If you think about if guys who are blue-collar workers, if you work in a warehouse where there's no substantial insulation in the ceiling, you have those metal roofs, and when it starts raining, it's just loud. Snow is different. Snow is very quiet. It's very peaceful. You're in your house, and you wake up in the morning, and you're like, why is it so quiet? Right? And you'll go open your drapes and you're like, oh my goodness, it snowed. Well, we had that a couple weeks ago, right? It was just, you wake up and it's like, what? All this snow on the ground. And for me, there was that moment where it's like, why is it so quiet? So snow insulates, it absorbs the sound of everything. It doesn't create sound, it doesn't create noise, it actually absorbs it. It creates something very beautiful, it's very pure, it's white. God in his wisdom made snow to be white of all colors it could have been. It's very slow, right? Snow is very slow. When raindrops come down, they're just, right? But snow it's like every single snowflake is just like, okay, I'll get there when I get there. It's kind of like Jesus when he was wandering around from village to village. He's like, he'll just go when he gets there when he gets there. I think it's great for us to ponder that during Lent. Snow's very soft, right? Kids love to play in snow because it's soft. We throw snowballs at each other because they're soft, generally, right? When you drive in snow, the thing about snow, though, when you're driving in snow is that you have to be more intentional. You have to be more intentional when you're driving in snow. So one, I suppose somebody could say it's more dangerous, but it's just you have to be more careful. It beckons you to be more careful. It heightens your awareness of what's going on. You know, it's like when you're driving in rain, passengers don't really care. When you're driving in snow, it's like all the passengers, even the baby in the car seat's paying attention. They're just, everybody's eyes are open. They're just like, because they know when the car's sliding, it's like, that's not normal. Everybody's paying attention. It just heightens the intensity of our intentionality and what we're doing. So I want to use this as an example. So, okay, a little story. The difference between it being intentional and not intentional, being careful and not being careful. A number of years ago, my family was going to Mass, and this was a long time ago. My mom did not really like for me to drive, but she would expect me to drive in two circumstances. When we were driving to Seattle, okay, downtown Seattle, or when we were driving in the snow. So one day we're going to church, we go to church, everything's fine, there's no snow on the ground or anything. We get out of church and and it had snowed like 3 or 4 inches during Mass, like in 1 hour. It was incredible. It just came out of nowhere. So my mom hands me the keys. So we got this big conversion van that we had at the time. So we're driving home, and I promptly get the van stuck. The roads were just a mess, completely caught everybody off guard. The roads hadn't been salted or anything. So we had to walk home, and it was about a 2-mile walk. Not bad. It was actually very beautiful, scenic, everything. So we're walking home. Well, in order to get to our home, you had to go up this really big hill. So we're walking up the hill. Well, people are really struggling in their cars on this hill, and people are coming down and they're sliding into the ditch, and people are trying to go up and they're sliding into the ditch, and it looks like there's just ballet of cars. They're just dancing and they're sliding all over the place. So I did what, I felt a good Christian young man should do given the circumstances. I went and got my video camera. So no, it was not very Christian of me. But I went and got my video camera, and this is before YouTube, and I started to record the display of chaos with the cars. And I became a spectator of the spectacle, and there was a bunch of people there with me. There was, 20 people maybe standing along the road. They're just watching cars slip and slide and bump into each other. And eventually, there was this one soldier who got caught in the fray, and he got his little Jeep stuck in the ditch. And so he walks up the hill. Now, there was the National Guard Armory at the top of the hill right by where we lived. So he walks up the hill. So he was going to work. He walks up the hill, and he goes and gets one of their Humvees and then parks the Humvee at the top of the hill and blocks the road. And so, I don't know if he had authority to do that, but he did it. He took charge, and he said, you know what, he was telling people as we walked by, he says, this is dangerous. I'm not letting you down that hill. You have to go around. It struck me because there I was, wanting to be entertained, just being a spectator. And he chose to become intentional. He chose to take the safety and the well-being of the other people. And there was some people who would fight him. They didn't want to drive around. They didn't believe him. At the bottom of the hill, there was a bunch of cars. And he just stood his ground. He made life intentional that day. He chose not to be a spectator. As a priest, when I go to hospitals and visit people who are dying, those are very intentional moments. And people in the midst of that are often really taking every single moment as a very precious moment. They're not spectators. They're not looking to be entertained. Now, I had one example. I went to the hospital one time to visit a teenager who had tried to commit suicide. And so I went to visit her at the request of the family, but I couldn't get her attention because Harry Potter was on TV. It was a very odd circumstance. Later on, we were able to connect, but it's the difference between being a spectator in life and being someone who's intentional. And when we become spectators in life, life is life's just messy. Life's ugly. In the story of Abraham and Isaac, God is asking Abraham to be very intentional. Now, he's putting him to the test. He's not going to have him kill his son, but he's putting him to the test. Abraham, would you give up everything for me? Would you give up your son for me? You know, as Christians, or as Catholics, we hear that story, and it's hauntingly similar to the one we're getting ready to reenact, if you will, during Holy Week, right? Where the Son comes to us again, and not carrying a bundle of branches for the sacrifice, but carrying his cross. And we, in a sense, take a different role, where we become the ones that say, this is not just a test. We're gonna take his life. We're gonna take it. Jesus is asking us to become intentional, and sometimes we're so hostile to becoming intentional in our lives that we're even willing to kill him. Now, the irony is that in doing that, we become intrinsically involved in the blood of Christ being poured out for the whole world. We're helping God bring the sacrifice, this eternal sacrifice, to fruition. But we do so in a very dark way. You know, as you walk through Jesus' life those last days, there was a lot of spectators. There were a lot of spectators. The jeerers, the people whipping him, people mocking him, lots of spectators. People just wanted to be entertained. They were entertained by watching Jesus suffer. Are we ever entertained by watching people suffer? YouTube might be a place of that. Huh? And so Jesus calls us to be intentional. Kind of like the soldier on the road who wanted to protect people. So Abraham now has to be intentional. He's asking to be the leader of the people. And his son, Isaac, also is asking not to be a spectator, but to be intentional. He's asking to give of himself completely. You see how obedient he was to his father. Peter and James and John, when they're up on the mountain, the Transfiguration, they're kind of like spectators, aren't they? And they're afraid, but they don't know what to say. And so they're watching Abraham. I'm sorry, my brain's still not working. Watching Elijah and Moses and Jesus, and they're like spectators. Peter's like, hey, let's build some tents here, this is great, this is awesome. But Jesus didn't want them to be spectators. When they're going down the mountain, they're going to Jerusalem for the last time. Peter, James, and John are comfortable where they're at, being kind of like followers of Jesus, but that's all coming to an end. They're now going to have to give of themselves. So being more intentional. Now, the thing about becoming more intentional is that we have to build up each other's confidence in doing so. We have to build up each other's confidence to going from being a spectator to being intentional. And so you come to Mass, like people come to Mass and they're comfortable sitting in their pew wherever they sit. But if they've never read the readings or if they've never participated in another way in one of the ministries, and I were to go up to them before Mass and say, hey, I need a lector. Can you fill in? And they've never done that in their life. They have no confidence in it. And so they're going to go into that mode of like, no way, I can't do it. But if they have confidence, if they have experience with public speaking, and if they have familiarity with the scriptures, and they have some of those things, they have those tools at hand, they could say, you know what, Father, I can do that. I could do that. Just, kind of show me the ropes a little bit, and I could do that. And so part of our job in expecting each other, each of us, to be intentional in our lives and not just spectators, is we need to build up each other's confidence. Now, this is especially true for parents and with their children. Do not, I don't want to make this sound like, now you parents, I was going to say, do not allow your children to become spectators spiritually. And that means, number one, at Mass, do not allow your children, even your teenage children, to be spectators. They must be fully intentionally involved during Mass. And so the first and foremost, that means praying. It means preparing for Mass by reading the Scriptures, by entering into the meaning of the Scriptures, right? By praying all the words, not just standing there like a lump, but praying the words during the Mass and singing. Okay, so full participation. Now, little kids, that's obviously harder, but at age-appropriate moments, kids can participate. I'm watching the kids who are preparing for First Communion, and it's like for the first time I'm watching them actually participate in some ways during the Mass because they've been given some confidence. They know the Our Father, right? They know some of the prayers. So they're able to do that. It's sad, though, when you see that most of these kids have never been challenged to actually sing the songs. They've never been taught the songs. They've never been expected to sing the songs. And so we got to raise the bar. We need to raise the bar on this so that people can be intentional about living their faith, especially spiritually. I always in confession ask, are you praying every day? I don't quite ask it that way, but are you praying every day? And the response usually is, kind of. That's the response, especially for the kids. It's kind of, yeah, most days. But it's not intentional. I don't get the sense like it's really intentional. And when somebody's intentional, it's like they want to tell me their whole prayer routine, and that's not necessarily what I wanted. I just wanted a yes or no. All right. Parents, help your kids be intentional. Teach them to be intentional spiritually. All right. I'm running out of gas here, so I'm going to leave it at that. But I'm really running out of gas. Okay. I'll talk to you probably next week. All right. God bless.